All right, a very good morning to you. We're always sitting here every morning and I get this notification on my phone going, OTB AM is now live, and I look up and I'm like, oh, all right, there you are. Hello, good morning to you and welcome. We've got a great show for you today. Fergus Connolly has literally one of the most interesting career paths in Irish sports history. He went from being a woodwork teacher to prowling the sidelines for the Welsh rugby team, and now worked with Jim Harbaugh at the University of Michigan in the States. Has loads of interesting views on player welfare issue, has worked with the Dubs under Jim Gavin, has some pretty strong thoughts on the Mayo football team, which he would have expressed in an interview with Paul Kimmage about a year ago. He's home at the moment from Michigan and he's sitting outside. He's going to join us in about 15 minutes to talk to us about Jim versus Jim.
Jim versus Jim is the big one. Harbaugh versus Gavin. Who wins in numerous categories is going to be the big part of my journalism this morning.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
It's time well spent.
So just to briefly run you through stuff that happened last night. It was 0-0 in the Carabao Cup game. VAR was used on multiple occasions because, well, it was a televised event and, you know, we haven't spent all this money on this fancy gear not to see it used, lads. Use it. Didn't overturn any of the actual decisions made by the referees in the 0-0 draw between Chelsea and Arsenal. Arsene Wenger in the stands for that one. Lots of minute by minutes on how often Wenger was smacking the table and did he actually, you know, grab Jens Lehmann, who was sitting beside him at any point, to see, you know, just people watching him trapped, caged, penned in, as opposed to being able to do his John Cleese on the sidelines.
Rattling the bars in the middle of the match whenever a foul may or may not have gone against Arsenal.
Yeah, Jamie Redknapp had a classic line.
Jamie Redknapp, the comedy genius that is Jamie Redknapp, was speaking on Sky Sports after the game and was speaking to Kelly Cates and was like, Thierry had a great one earlier on. He was like, who's the man of the match? And he said, VAR is the man of the match.
Hey.
Chortle, chortle, chortle. And the Sky Sports studio erupted into chortles.
I think you're the first person who's ever said chortle, chortle, chortle like that. Well,
you know, it can only apply in one situation, and that is Jamie Redknapp's unbelievable sense of humour.
It can be your stock and trade. So VAR man of the match last night. The pre-season GAA competitions continued apace. Funnily enough, Tyrone won 222 to 7 points against Cavan at Kingspan Breffni Park. Revenge, obviously, for Rory Gallagher. They won 113 to 110 against Donegal. The photograph in the paper showed Nathan Mullins being surrounded by two of the Fermanagh lads as well, who were obviously having a little word with him. Nathan obviously is a St Vincent's club player and has is playing for Donegal. I think by virtue of the fact that he grew up there as a kid, I think that's the I don't know what the technical connection that you need to be able to play inter-county football for somebody like that.
I don't know either, to be honest, but I just know that he's there now, and is a new asset to them, because this is his first season with the senior panel.
Yeah.
It's a great signing, so to speak, for Donegal. But yeah, they'll be absolutely devastated that they let Gallagher go as a result of last night's managerial masterclass.
Completely, yeah. Well, and also the fact that, you know, they could have got Jim McGuinness if they'd only known that he was obviously they're not going to get Jim McGuinness, that's a joke. But the other big story is, of course, that Martin O'Neill is now the outright favourite for the job at Stoke. It appears as if O'Neill has met the ownership at Stoke and has had a chat with them, and they've got down to the nitty-gritty of the fact that he actually wants to bring, if he takes the job, that he actually wants to bring his full backroom staff with him, which includes Roy Keane. There had been this thought that he could do the job part-time. That was kind of, it had been floated. Stoke are not too keen on that, obviously, because they've got like a multi-million-pound investment in the club staying up in the Premier League, and that's the one job he's going to have to do. It also, you know, it was pointed out that they've had two managers since they bought the club again, and they're very patient with their managers, as we've seen obviously with the Mark Hughes situation. So it might not be a question of him taking this job for 6 months. It could be a question of him taking this job and then trying to build something with them, as opposed to it being a stopgap until Slaven Bilic arrives, for example, in the summer, which was one of the other suggestions that was floated. But Roy Keane, I think a lot of us had assumed that Roy Keane was part of the Ireland management setup, and that rift with John Delaney had healed to such a point that actually it would be the perfect solution for everybody for Keane to be the next Ireland manager. The rumours in all the papers today are that Keane is actually going to go with O'Neill to be part of his backroom team. Now, I'm not sure this is going to happen. I'm kind of just going to wait and see before I go, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense to me, because in his updated autobiography, he talked about his time at Aston Villa, and there's a particular incident, I don't know if it's a specific moment, where Paul Lambert is refusing to play Darren Bent. There's no goals in that Aston Villa team. Keane is looking at Bent going, spent a lot of money on this guy, he scored goals. I mean, okay, He's not the best footballer. The ball kind of careers off his shin on multiple occasions. He can't really control it. But in the 6-yard box, it might come off his arse and go into the back of the net. And literally, it ain't coming off anybody else's arse in our team at the moment. So stick him in the team. And Lambert's like, no. So Keane was saying, if I go back into the Premier League and that ever happens again, I want to be in charge. I need to be able to make those decisions because it's too frustrating. So I don't know if the relationship with O'Neill is so much better and more evolved. I don't know. He's just decided that he can now reverse from that position that he had so recently in his head and say, actually, I can just take this job.
Yeah.
Maybe the Ireland job isn't on offer.
Maybe not. But also, coming back to that assistant managerial role, the not having to control thing would also have been an issue at Ireland. Maybe he was saying, let's not pick Shane Long because it might come off Darryl Murphy's arse instead of Shane Long's arse. And that, those conversations are just as likely to happen with Martin O'Neill as they are to happen with the Premier League manager.
I think it's more pronounced though in the Premier League.
Of course, you got more games.
Exactly. And so you can kind of come in and do your bit in international, and then it's like, maybe he's got more of Martin O'Neill's ear. Maybe he's got more influence than he did have with Lambert. So I don't know. I don't know exactly what's going to happen with that. But all of the newspapers are running with the fact that it's not a fait accompli that Martin O'Neill is going to take this job, but that Stoke have met with O'Neill, which is news, and that he seems very interested to the point where they're actually talking about it. There is one other potential candidate. Yeah,
Quique Sanchez-Flores, who formerly of Watford, very successful Watford manager in my view, that he was one of this kind of chain of managers that Watford got for a season, then ditched, and got another one for a season, and then ditched them again. Like, the name escapes me now, the guy who got them promoted back into the Premier League for their current stint. Then they got in Flores for their first season up, and he kept them up quite substantially. They weren't ever really in a relegation battle in the second half of the season. Then Walter Mazzarri comes in, keeps them up again, and he's in that ilk of manager who can take a team and make them comfortable in the middle of the Premier League. So that is why they're looking at Flores, but that's also why they're looking at Martin O'Neill, because he's got that sort of pedigree. But does Martin O'Neill bring a little bit more stability and has proven it over a longer period of time than Flores? Of course he does. But let's not forget that, like, the manager that they've just departed from led them to 3 consecutive 9th-place finishes in Mark Hughes. So they are looking for a manager who can do something similar. And I think Martin O'Neill is a much better option than Flores in that regard. Flores is essentially still a one-season wonder in the Premier League.
Okay, so Jokanovic, is that?
Yeah, Jokanovic, who then went on to Fulham, I think, after he left Watford. And didn't manage to get a second promotion back in the Premier League. There seemed to be just a strange situation at Watford there with the Ponto family. And
they're bonkers.
And I don't know why they want to change manager every year. Maybe it is because they think to themselves, 18 months is the average lifespan for a Premier League manager. May as well do it in the summer as opposed to January when things are going wrong. So I don't know.
I'd forgotten that Quique Sanchez-Flores took Watford to the semi-finals of the Cup.
Oh yeah, of course.
2015, 2016 as well. And not that Stoke give a rat's ass about the Cup.
Not this season anyway.
All they want to do is qualify for or stay in the Premier League. So look, that's the situation with regards to Martin O'Neill. We'll try and get some analysis and reaction to it a little bit later on. But if you want to give us your opinion on whether or not O'Neill, at this stage, I don't actually have any problem with O'Neill talking. The contract hasn't been signed. We're in between tournaments. There's plenty of time for Ireland to get another manager. And actually, you know what? These things happen in football. He's been there for 2 campaigns. They gave as good as they could. And if the time has now come for a separation, fair enough.
Absolutely. It's
because people are very angry about the fact that John Delaney didn't tie him down to an actual written contract when they issued the press release that he was staying before the Wales game. I'm like, this is not really how football works. And so you can't keep somebody if they've decided that, okay, we've had enough right now.
No, it's also led to a little bit of a stopgap in the, I suppose, information flow around the story, that there hasn't been as many Irish strong sources around this, because essentially Stoke City don't have to offer the FAI anything for the services of Martin O'Neill due to the aforementioned contract, that they can go straight to Martin O'Neill and say, you're out of contract, come manage our football club. And as a result, there's nobody from the FAI leaking any information because they don't have any information themselves, maybe. So it's a very interesting one. I don't think anybody's going to be pointing the finger at John Delaney after this, saying you should have tied him down to a contract. There's a little bit of a it's almost like, yeah, I'm kind of happy this relationship has broken down. You know, at least we finally had a reason. I'm thankful for that straw that just broke the camel's back a little bit.
Like the Irish male who won't break up with somebody who's in...
Precisely.
They don't like, you want somebody else to do it for you.
A lot of people will feel that way about Martin O'Neill, I suspect. And
I think we should be careful about that, because, like, who are we actually going to get?
That's the thing. That is the thing.
Mick McCarthy is the next Ireland manager.
Really?
I'm willing to bet my life that Mick McCarthy is going to be the next Ireland manager, and I wonder how happy everybody's going to be about that.
It's a substantial enough bet right there. You could say that's a monkey. Is that your version of betting a monkey? Your own life on Mick McCarthy becoming the next Ireland manager. That is an incredible bet. We'll keep you up to speed on that one and how that bet goes down for Ger over the next couple of weeks.
Pretty cheap.
We may as well run through some of the back pages.
Just before we do, I'm going to give you an opportunity to enter our competition today, because we're giving you a chance to win a copy of FIFA 18 on the PS4. All you have to do is share the live stream and tag one of your mates who you always beat in FIFA, which you know, if you're David Myler, is pretty much the whole world. Owen and I had to pick our FIFA Ultimate Teams yesterday. I won, of course. We're going to bring you the full video on youtube.com/offtheball a little bit later on today. But first, check this out. Kevin De Bruyne told the base of my midfield, it's radical, but it's just going to work. And so, it's Leo Messi! He gets to go first again! Oh, what a tragedy! My team's the winner!
This draft is absolutely fucked.
Come on! Just pick Ronaldo, be done with it. Okay, so see, I know you want Neymar, and I might just pick him to piss you off.
Go for it.
I'm gonna pick Suarez.
Because
I'm gonna bite people. So you pick Neymar,
I'm
picking Mbappe. I'm not even waiting. I'm just picking Mbappe because we've got a team of tyros.
And then finally, Harry Kane.
I don't think Harry Kane's gonna cut it in the big games.
Cutting.
There you go. So we did a draft. That's why I got to pick first. Because obviously we both would have picked Messi if we had the opportunity to. But age before beauty, I went first.
Well, we thought about it, and then it ended up being a 4-3-3. So if you do the maths, whoever picks first gets to pick first in every single line. So you got the best goalkeeper, defender, midfielder, and forward. But I still think I got a better overall team.
Up there for dancing.
Around all the back pages this morning, it is the same story pretty much everywhere. It is the story of the day. It is Martin O'Neill, and we'll start with the Irish Independent. Their headline reads, O'Neill in Stoke talks with Keane, part of the team. Assistant likely to leave with Ireland's boss if Potter's move materialises. Meanwhile, or actually just before I move off the Irish Independent, an interesting one there by Cian Tracy, saying that Felix Jones rejected a Springboks offer. He had turned down an offer from Rassie Erasmus to become the Springboks skill coach in favour of remaining with Munster. So that's very good news from a Munster point of view, but also tells you how highly rated Felix Jones is by Rassie Erasmus on that coaching ticket. Excuse me, on the Irish Examiner then, we've got out the gap, Stoke nearing deal for O'Neill and Keane. There on the Irish Examiner then, in the Times, Keane to go too if O'Neill joins Stoke. That's John Fallon's story there. You've got the result from last night, by the way, which was Chelsea-Arsenal 0-0 in the first leg of the Carabao Cup semi-final. A Stoke crest then is on the back of the Irish Daily Star. O'Neill and Keane on the brink, says Paul Lennon. Stoke deal could be done by tonight, he says, while in the Mirror it is stoked. It's a pretty simple but punchy headline there. Potter's open talks with Irish boss and want a manager in place for a Manchester United clash. That's next Monday night, that United game is. So Roy Keane could be going straight back to Old Trafford if he is to be part of that new coaching ticket at Stoke. Going, reads the headline in the Irish Daily Mail. Philip Quinn sub-headline says, O'Neill edging ever closer to an Ireland exit. While in the Herald, Stoke talk to O'Neill. Reads the headline there. Potter's keen for a swift deal as FAI hope to promote Keane. And finally, pretty much all the papers, as I say today, leading with O'Neill, the Sun, they're saying talking pot shots. Stoke in for Flores, Mart. So it does seem to be between Quique Sanchez Flores and Martin O'Neill, if you're to believe the Sun this morning. And I think Martin O'Neill is probably going to win that head-to-head. Maybe hand us over the red tops because I'll do the front pages of them as well. Bridge stalemate, Chelsea and Arsenal failed to fire, and then Sevilla ready to call in UEFA over ticket standoff with Manchester United. This is a really interesting story where Sevilla are price gouging the away Manchester United fans, and in fairness to them, Manchester United have decided, okay, screw you Sevilla, we're going to charge you your away fans the exact same amount of money that you're charging our fans, and we're going to use that money to subsidise our away fans to make sure that they're paying the same price that everybody else paid. So Liverpool paid, I think, 58 quid when they were 54 pounds sterling when they went to the away leg earlier this season. Manchester United fans are being charged 70 something, so 79, 89? 89, yeah. So Sevilla are basically gouging Man United fans. Man United are actually coming to the rescue. I mean, it's buttons for Manchester United in the global scheme of things, but at least they're pretending to care about it. An amazing, brilliant headline from The Guardian today. Leaking of Froome's failed drugs test harmed cycling, says Harrington. So this is Julie Harrington, who is British Cycling's chief executive.
I saw somebody on Twitter last night correct this for you. It was corrected for you. And then it was, they blacked out the leaking of, and it's Froome's failed drugs test harm cycling, says Harrington. But she didn't say that. She said that the information, the fact that it came out is actually bad, which is precisely the bollocks that you hear around drug stories all the time from people who are involved in sports, which is completely missing the whole point. That it's the people who are taking the drugs who are the bad people, as opposed to the leakers of the fact that people have taken drugs. It's very simple. It's really easy to get your head around. Taking drugs in sport isn't a good thing. People who get that information out to the rest of the public is probably a much better thing. Crammed into a cheap seat, Wenger is still not cornered. That's the headline on Barney Roney's piece at Stamford Bridge. Everybody writing about the fact that Wenger was in the stands watching the game in the press box because nothing happened in the match of any significant interest beyond the VAR being used 3 or 4 times. Raheem Sterling going to get a massive new deal at Manchester City as well, because he's becoming one of the most effective players in world football at the moment under Pep Guardiola. The headline in one of the papers today about Dele Alli, Spurs are going to double Dele Alli's salary all the way to 100 grand a week, and meanwhile Sterling will be like 250, 300 a week, maybe 350. Who knows what he's going to get, because City had the big book, and Dele Alli must be looking at that going, come on.
What, is he 10% better than Dele Alli this season?
In terms of
if you just judge it on this season's form alone.
In the eye test.
Well, form obviously is much better than 10%, but I think he's probably got a 10% edge on him.
Yeah, but I think if you put Dele Alli in that
Man City team, of course, then it's he's far more effective. He is not double the player that Dele Alli is, no question.
And then having the last laugh, this is a golf story in the back of the Racing Post today. City 20-1 now to win all 4 major trophies, which is coming down from whatever it was earlier in the season. We said, oh, that's not the worst bet we've ever seen. Sanchez last stand. Sorry,
you're going to bet your life on that one as well?
No, I'm not. Sanchez last stand. This everybody thinks this is probably the last game for Alexis Sanchez at Arsenal in that one. And then look, I just wanted to do the front pages of the tabloids because hell, why wouldn't we? This is McGregor and Mayweather going at each other again in, is it Twitter or Instagram? Twitter. Okay, so it's Twitter this time. Conor, I am the cartel. And yes, he does mean that cartel. So, just to bring you through, UFC heroes boast to Floyd after boxer mocks him online. Then feud boss Daniel Kinahan weighs in for star. So, I'm literally just going to read this and not comment on it. Conor and cartel boss gang up on the money is the story in page 4 of the Star today. So, and they've helpfully dug out the tweets for us. So I'll just read them for you. Mayweather was at McGregor saying, ha, you're going to get killed by the cartel, or something in the equivalent of that. 2018 is going to be the year where they whack you. And then he just comes back, McGregor comes back and says, I am the cartel. At which point, at DJK256, which the Star says is Daniel Kinahan, says, now at Floyd Mayweather should not believe all you read in the paper, must be looking for a rematch against at Notorious MMA.
He's got a good line of promoting lined up there, Daniel Kinahan.
And there is Richard Branson getting kicked in the nuts by Conor McGregor yesterday on the Pendulum stage. So Floyd Mayweather, Richard Branson, Conor McGregor, Daniel Kinahan.
Yeah, it's an ultimate tag team. Can we just get, if there's any talented songwriters out there, can they write a song called I Am the Cartel and just do it like I Am the Walrus by the Beatles, please?
So just go back to the first one there, sorry. I'm going to go back to the first one here because I better do justice to this, right? So Floyd Mayweather, out of nowhere, links to this headline. Conor McGregor allegedly punched a member of the Irish cartel and may have a €900,000 bounty on his head. I already fucked you up in 2017. Now they about to fuck you up in 2018. You're about to start your new year off with a bang. Knife, hammer, pick, bomb, popcorn? Is that last one? Coffin. So
same thing.
Yeah. So knife, hammer, pick, bomb, coffin. I am the cartel. With way more likes and way more retweets than Floyd Mayweather. So screw you, Floyd. Conor seems to be winning this battle. But then, who else wades in to get involved? It's the Munster Rugby lads. Incorrect, says Simon Zebo. At Conor Murray, we may need to pay this man a visit. And then, I don't know what the middle and second last, it's Cry Laughing, and then it's On Fire Flaming. I don't know what the other two are. They look like ghosts. And then Cian Healy, come on at Simon Zebo. You're no threat to anyone. Mob rules. I mean, Cian Healy is probably right about this. especially when you see who else gets involved a little bit later on. How's your laundry, by the way? If Pablo gives the order, Mystic Mac will be taken out, and you too again. So it seems like Rory Best is actually the godfather in all of this. Pretty weak move, my friend, says Cian Healy. Distance means nothing. Conor Murray, you'd want to make a few more knives in that shed of yours. What's that about? What is going on in Cian Healy's shed? Only an amateur would bring a knife to a gunfight, and we all know the story about that one. And then we finish with this, which I can't remember. Rush Hour. It's Rush Hour. That's the Jackie Chan vehicle for this one. We have been practicing for you, Churchy, says Simon Zebo, and then they kept going. So
it's just going to be a string of crying, laughing faces, responded with a crying, laughing face, responded with a crying, laughing face, responded with a crying, laughing face, and we'll just reach crying, laughing face, Armageddon. And
then Daniel Kennan got involved and everybody stopped.
Yeah, okay. That is mortality I'm staring in the face.
And we're stopping now too. Right. Where to? Oh yeah,
that's all I'm going to say about that particular story.
That was the front of the Sun also had that story. Floyd, they about to F you up in 2018. Connor, it's all a load of bollocks. I am the cartel.
Is there any point going through Wenger's timeline last night?
Yeah, quickly, yeah.
A very good piece of journalism here by Gary Jacob, who was sitting directly behind Wenger, who of course was sitting in the press box last night because he's got a ban from the touchline. 90 seconds into the match, Jens Lehmann is first out and purposefully strides to his seat. Wenger is sandwiched between the German to his right and a security guard to his left. Wenger rocks back and forth and shakes his head as Alvaro Morata wriggles down the left. 17 minutes, Wenger becomes agitated. Eden Hazard goes down. He slams his hands down on the blue workbench in front of him. 29 minutes, more concern in Wenger's face. Chambers pushes Azpilicueta. VAR is requested. Wenger cannot feign ignorance about not seeing an incident when there is a television monitor in front of him. It's a good burn there by Gary Jacob. Wenger gently leans back in his seat as Arsenal are looking more comfortable. 20 seconds before the interval, Wenger is perfectly placed on a low row adjacent to the stairs, which lead down to the press room. It's a short walk from there to the dressing room. His security guard pushes a journalist to the side so the Frenchman can walk down the stairs. Lehmann follows closely behind, but emerges first after the interval. Then, 57 minutes in, this is the big one. Jack Wilshere is injured. Wenger never flinches. Finally, at this point, Wenger has given up covering his mouth with his left hand and muttering under his breath. He seems to wave an instruction at the bench, but no one is looking at him, which is the most heartbreaking point of this whole Arsene Wenger story, chronicled perfectly by Gary Jacob of The Times.
We were asking yesterday for your top 5 Irish fantasy sports documentaries. Kieran Cunningham had set this idea in motion for us, and we were asking, we had a poll on Instagram yesterday, who would you like to see a documentary about more? Was it Saipan or Michelle Smith? Funnily enough, less people want to see the Michelle Smith documentary than want to see the Saipan documentary.
Of course, obviously.
We've €0 on our Kickstarter, do we?
Yeah, it's got off to a great start. We've haven't even set up the Kickstarter page.
There's our poll. Follow us on Instagram for more of that goodness for Owen with his eyes half open and half closed. He's gazing off into an imaginary future where he's holding Oscar in his hands and kissing beauty queens. Right, let's move on because we're asking you this morning if you'd be disappointed to see O'Neill and Keane go to Stoke. Kenny Cunningham, good morning to you.
Morning, lads.
This story has been rumbling on for long enough that it finally seemed to grow legs in the last 48 hours or so, and many of the newspapers are this morning reporting that there have been meetings to the point where we now believe that if Martin O'Neill is to take this job, his entire backroom team and Roy Keane will also be part of it. So A, do you think it's more likely to happen than not, and B, what are the implications for the Irish football team?
Well, I suppose, yeah, it's reasonably likely to happen. I think it was always quite obvious, but I think everybody felt if the opportunity came for Martin to jump back in at a club in the Premiership, he would take it. So it doesn't surprise me. Certainly he was linked to the job, and potentially he's considering taking it. And again, no surprise that he would take. Certainly the majority of his backroom staff have obviously worked with him for quite a long period of time, Ger. And also, I suppose Roy as well, although I don't think it's a natural assumption maybe Roy would go with him. I think potentially, certainly John Delaney would be working hard maybe behind the scenes, if not speaking to Roy privately, looking maybe for Roy to step in if Martin potentially was to take the job at Stoke and take his backroom staff with him. So potentially there would be a little bit of continuity there. And I think ideally from our point of view, I think that's the ideal for me really, in terms if you do lose your manager, there's somebody within the system who's been working around the place who can immediately in this instance, of course, it's Roy, obviously one of our most iconic figures. But I very much like the idea. I know that wasn't John's intention when Roy came in. It was Martin's decision to bring Roy in. But I like the idea of certainly one of our former players, being part of the backroom team for a period of time, and then almost a natural process of him stepping up and taking the job after that, and the process kind of repeating itself then as we go forward. Whether that'll happen or not, I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think I was just quoting stuff from his updated version of the paperback version of his autobiography, where he was saying he didn't really want to go back into the Premier League or any management job as an assistant full-time, that the international job suited him a bit more than a club job. So I don't think it's a natural assumption, even though it's been mentioned that Keane might be part of this package, that he will automatically be. I think you would like to assume the FAI will maybe give him the job and give him the job for the next 2 years and say, right, there is continuity here, but you now have the opportunity to be your own man and manage the team. And I think that would be a perfect solution to all of this.
Yeah, and I think there's a real opportunity for Roy to stamp his authority on the squad as well. I know he's been assistant to Martin. He would have given his opinion and voiced his opinion to Martin on a number of things, but ultimately Martin was the manager and Martin made the decision. And I'm sure privately that's always a bit of frustration when you have the role as an assistant manager, kind of stroke coach, and you're never quite sure how much influence Roy has around the squad in terms of team selection, kind of preparation, in terms of how things operate around the team. So, and it's a huge job, the Irish national team job. It's a huge job. It's the best job in the world. Obviously, certainly myself, I'm sure we're all quite biased in that respect. So, for Roy to have the opportunity to step in, and like you said, Jer, just stamp his authority and run it the way he wants to. Having already had a taste of it in terms of being around the squad, understanding what it's about, knowing the individual players, and even at this particular time, Jer, over the next kind of 18 months, it's quite a unique situation in terms of when our next qualifiers come around in March of next year. It's almost a unique opportunity for me to actually come into the job, and when I say stamp our authority, I mean actually put a stamp his personality on the team and an opportunity to integrate a real batch of younger players into the squad over the next kind of 12 to 15 month period, and really an opportunity to develop some of the younger players, 19 to 21 level lads aren't even being mentioned at the moment in terms of being around the squad. Bring these players in, have a look at them around the squad, and actually, really build. I know it's a bit of a cliche, build for the next kind of major tournament, but it's a real opportunity, a real kind of window to bring these players in and work with the players over the next period of time, and try and find the next batch of half a dozen more younger players who are really going to drive the squad over the next maybe 4 to 6 to 8 years.
Just on the last point on that, Kenny, it seems almost like a done deal at this point because Martin O'Neill wants it, Stoke want him, but do Stoke definitely want him over Quique Sanchez-Flores?
I wouldn't know, Owen, to be honest with you. I can understand why they'd want Martin, Owen. I've got to be honest, the position that they're in, it's quite a precarious position. They're certainly not cut adrift, but certainly some of Martin's experience, I would think in these situations, somebody to kind of just steady things at the club and bring a kind of measure of maybe a calm or an order to things. So I can understand why they would jump for Martin. That's not totally unusual for a club in this situation. Maybe jumping for somebody of Martin's experience. So I can certainly understand that. And I can understand why Martin would be interested. I mean, you think he's realistic enough to know, one of the top jobs as such isn't going to drop into his lap. And yeah, they might be in a slightly precarious situation, but they're not cut adrift. There'll be money there to spend, and he's got to back himself to go in there, have an impact. And if he does keep them up, there'll be an opportunity there for him to build with the next couple of years as well. So I think it's a real opportunity for Martin. It's just a big question for me is whether Roy, the big decision for me is probably not so much Martin, but Roy's decision in terms of whether to step away from the Irish national team alongside Martin, or to actually say, well, no, Martin, I've enjoyed the experience, but I'm ready now to step in myself and really stamp my own authority, my personality on this squad.
So just to be clear, you think the FAI should offer Roy Keane the opportunity to succeed Martin O'Neill if he takes the Stoke job?
Well, I think they will. That's my point. I always felt as if the longer they were in the job, I think they were pleased with how the partnership was working, and it seemed an obvious thing down the line, a consequence in terms of at one stage I think Martin would step aside, and then the question was always going to be whether Roy would be ready to stay in. And I think it's the right thing to do in terms of the transition from assistant manager to manager. It's something that I'd like to see, something which I would have wanted to see a few years ago, to be honest with you, integrate a number of players into the system, working underneath the present manager. So when he did step aside, they would naturally just step into the position. The kind of process kind of repeat itself. And if that was the case, if Roy was to take the job, some very talented young Irish coaches around both the Premier League and at different levels, players he would have played with. I think very talented coaches, and I would hope they would come into consideration as well if Roy was to take the job and bring these type of players into the system. Now we can build again, and kind of build that kind of maybe kind of dynasty that we're talking about potentially going forward.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask if you'd be interested in getting involved in that.
Well, I wasn't leading you down that alley, Jay. You know me better than that. But now look, any ex-Irish player working coaching who's got aspirations to coach any kind of level, that's an easy answer. That's an easy yes. I mean, it's like I said to you before. It's the biggest honor you could be asked, and not just to manage the Ireland team, but be asked to go in as part of any kind of management team and work with the senior international pool of players. It's the elite pool of players, and it's every kind of stroke ex-players, kind of coaches' dream. So I'd be no exception to anybody else. That's not my point.
No, sure.
As a general
makes sense.
point.
I think it makes a whole heap of sense for the FAI to step in now and say, look, yeah, grand, but you can't have him. We want him, and hopefully Roy Keane says yes to that.
I think so. It must be tempting for Roy. Had a taste of it. It must be tempting for him to, to be his own. We know Roy's his own man. He likes to do his things his way. And as much as he can maybe influence things to a point, influence things being his assistant manager, it's still not the same as being manager, being the top man, and actually dictating things yourself in terms of, style of play, tactically how we play. This is how I want to prepare the team. This is what I expect. These are my standards. This is how we operate. And like I said, really stamp his authority on the team, and with a real to build something over the next kind of year to 18 months before the next qualifiers, in terms of really having a good look at the squad, who's out there, who's on the periphery of the squad, who potentially could be there in the next couple of years in terms of real young talent out there.
All right. And
really throw yourself into it along with that kind of management team that I'm talking about. So yeah, in some ways, you might say a little bit disappointed we're going to lose our manager, but at the same time as well, excitement. That's a great opportunity going forward there for the new manager and his team of people.
All right, Kenny, great stuff. Thanks very much for taking the call this morning.
No problem, lads. Take care.
That's Kenny Cunningham, future assistant to Roy Keane in the Ireland management setup. But I would love to see that kind of stuff happen, where there is look, it doesn't automatically guarantee you're going to get the job immediately if the incumbent manager leaves, because obviously if things go completely pear-shaped, you'll probably end up being tarnished by it. But there's a sense that we're bringing coaches through. Keith Andrews, another one who's worked at the underage setup, and there's a bunch of others who have also done it. I mean, maybe Duffer is somebody who goes from Rovers to the Ireland setup if Roy Keane gets the gig. But I think it makes a lot of sense to give Roy Keane the gig and to try and get him, as opposed to having this 4 or 5 months of uncertainty. Yeah,
there is the whole betting into the whole international process as well, the infrequency of the games. I think Duffer, for example, going from the Shamrock Rovers and how much he loves being hands-on with the football every day, going to an international setup might not be ideal. The whole betting in as an assistant manager that Roy Keane had.
He could probably do both though, couldn't he?
Well, that's the thing. I suppose he could. I'm not a big fan of this doing both. Like, can you really? I know it is kind of talking about the stuff that's going on in the back of your mind, away from the pitch, and just even thinking about it in your subconscious a little bit. I think that stuff is important when it comes to the national team. When you've gone, when you've collected this amount of data, going to watch all these teams in the United Kingdom. I don't know. I think a job share is a thing of a previous decade, to be quite honest.
All right, Fergus Connolly is going to be with us in a moment, but first here's Johnny Sexton previewing the game against Glasgow at Scotstoun this weekend.
I wouldn't say, look, there was parts of our game against Munster in the second half and Connacht that we weren't too happy about. I think we were happier with our overall performance against Ulster across the 80 minutes, but there's been plenty to, the reviews haven't been very straightforward. There's been lots that we've been working on and we've been trying to get better on. We need to, because there's big challenges ahead. Starting this weekend and then obviously going to Montpellier the week after. It's 2 huge games for us, and if anything, those 3 games were to try and get us ready for these 2. These are the biggest games of the season. Rounds 5 and 6, they always are. You've always got something to fight for, it's a massive few weeks ahead.
John, Glasgow's strengths, do you think Johnny Cunningham this match, and do you think they even still apply, because you've got to bear in mind that they might be playing with a full strength team this weekend as well?
Yeah, well, I think they have to play close to their full strength, don't they? Because they've got a lot of injuries, and how small the European greater squad is, that they'll have to pick guys from that squad. They can't just draft in, academy guys or whatever. So I think, look, they're an outstanding team. They've shown that in the league. They've one defeat, I think, in the league, and they seem to be really well coached. That's pretty clear from playing against them. Pretty aggressive around the breakdown and in their carries and stuff like that. So look, we have to just make sure that we're as well prepared as possible, and we expect to play against the best Glasgow team, and we have to go in with that mindset. Yeah,
we'll obviously keep you up to date on the Champions Cup action all weekend here on OTB. Just check offtheball.com or listen to the radio on News Talk or Today FM for updates right across the Off The Ball platform. If you want to get in touch with us this morning, you can tweet us underneath the live streams on YouTube, Facebook, or at Off The Ball AM on Twitter as well. That's another account that we need you to follow and turn on the notifications for. Now, I'm delighted to say Fergus Connolly is with us. You're home for a while anyway.
Home for a few days.
Yeah. Is it a flying visit and then back to Michigan?
Yeah. Got in on Tuesday morning and head back Sunday, so short visit. Nice to get home. I haven't been home for I think it's about 2 years now. So
okay, right.
It's nice to get back.
Yeah, so that last 2 years, we may as well start at the most recent point before we get to the beginnings of this. I said earlier on you got one of the most interesting careers in Irish sport, and at the moment you're working with Jim Harbaugh at the University of Michigan. We'll talk about your path to that in a couple of minutes' time, but like for people who are unaware, this is like one of the biggest, most storied football programs in America.
Yeah, and I guess even when I started working, I didn't really appreciate how big the university is, the football program, the legacy, and it's an incredible organisation. And college football, as you know, is so big, so can be a little bit daunting at times. When you play, you've got 110,000 people in the stadium every single weekend.
It's ridiculous.
It is. You walk out and you look around, and I've been fortunate at Croke Park, Millennium Stadium, but 110,000 people in a stadium packed is a little bit different. It's the biggest every weekend in college sport.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the biggest in world sport, is it? Or is there?
I think it is, and I think we still hold the record. I think there were 115 at one particular game.
Squeezed in.
What's 5,000 at that stage? But it's great, and there's an incredible legacy, and there's a very famous coach previous, both Shem Beckler, and the history and the stories with that programme. It's an impressive programme.
With Ohio State, would that match be the highlight of the year? I know it was. There you go. I think that was Ann Arbor this year, wasn't it? And it didn't go so well.
Yeah. No. The rivalry between that is the biggest game in college sport every single year. Ohio State, Michigan is singularly the biggest game, every year.
What do you do?
A little bit of everything, to be quite honest. I started off originally working in performance, strength and conditioning, nutrition, the actual performance of the players. My job took on more responsibility this year with operations, which is essentially all of the running of the program. So everything from scheduling flights to hotels to, for example, so we had the bowl week in Tampa, so making sure that basically if anything goes wrong, or I have to make sure nothing goes wrong, and the head coach, I see it before he does.
Yeah.
So,
he shouts at you, basically.
Well, pretty much he'll come to me first, and I need to have an answer, or as I joke with him, I need to see it before he does. But it's that's what you live for, those challenges, and you get better and better at it. So
they're very different things, like operations and performance. I mean, obviously there's you need to be organised, and you need to be able to kind of have the vision, and you need to have the ultimate end goal of trying to make a successful programme. I can see why somebody who trusts you in one sphere would go, okay, I want you to look after this as well. But from your own career perspective, they're quite different things, aren't they?
Yes, but in order for a program to run, or any organisation to run smoothly, the two have to be linked, because just a simple example is scheduling meals, to make sure they're scheduled at the appropriate time. There's nobody better than the operations person to make sure once you have those in place. I think also, as you build with any organisation, you have to build a pathway, so you can't go from 0 to 60. So when you have the performance model in place, then you can build the operations on top of it. So it's making sure they're synced. It provides a huge advantage.
So if anybody again is unaware, Jim Harbaugh is the head coach we're talking about, and there's always this thing about Harbaugh. He comes in, he's got this intense work ethic, and then after a period of time in various other organisations, he's moved on. I have a feeling that maybe that narrative is not necessarily going to happen this time. I mean, I understand he's under pressure because he's got to win a load of games, and when you get paid the money he does, that's always going to be the case. But that ultimately, this time, he seems to have found a job where it's the right job for him, and the burnout that maybe some of the players might have had in the past, allegedly, I don't know if that's true or not, we can talk about that, I can see you smiling already, that doesn't happen in college because the players naturally move through anyway. So, you know, you can refresh your playing pool every 2.5, 3 years automatically.
Yeah, and I think Michigan means something different to Jim Harbaugh. You know, he played there, his father coached there, he has it means something different to him. And I think as well, you know, we have to be successful and we have to win. So, you know, it's a little bit different than the pros. And college football is very, very different from the NFL because you're right, the players change and the players come through. So there's a lot more focus on development and getting players to the NFL. I think in the NFL itself, it's a lot more fluid. Both players and coaches move. Yeah. There's not as much movement in you know, in college. Is
it your gut instinct that you're going to be at Michigan for a while?
Hopefully, yeah. I think Michigan it's unique in that there's no other university has the combination of academic development, research, and sport performance. You know, Stanford have one, don't have the other. Notre Dame, whatever. But Michigan is unique in that sense. So we can draw on a lot of the development, the research in engineering and the other sporting domains to improve the football program.
And presumably it takes a little while for you guys all to get as good at this as you will eventually become. Like, you're going to get better year on year.
That's always the plan. And you know, all good programs become ruthless and more efficient in terms of finding their best pathway to success, or basically how they perform better. And then there's constant changes, coaching changes and whatever.
Well, why didn't it work this year for you? Like, because it wasn't the most successful season that you could have had, right? Mm-hmm. There was pressure as the season went on, and part of that's just that usual nonsense about, he gets paid loads of money, so he's got to win every game. But that actually, you know, these programs take time, and historically, the best programs have had people who have built over a period of time. There are some instances which somebody comes in, wins 1 year and leaves again, and it's like, I mean, I think that they tend to be a bit of a fluke, but
I think there are two things. I think, you know, you're right. It's, you could argue, early stages, but as well, we lost. I think we had 11 guys go in the draft last year. We lost a lot of players. Our defense lost quite a few players as well. So having those young players come in and play, I think when you look back on it and when you look back on the performance of our players, I think we actually did quite well considering. Okay, so don't get me wrong, not good enough.
Sure,
never good enough.
Yeah.
But I think when you take a lot of those things into account, I think it paints the performance maybe in a different light.
When you listen to Jim Harbaugh's podcast, the Sting says the Harbaugh family approach every day with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. Does he indeed approach every day with an enthusiasm unlike any other person in the history of mankind?
Pretty much, it's demanded of you. Yeah, it's and that comes from his father. You know, I joke, not around him, but I do joke that he's not the best coach in the world. He's not even the best coach in his family. Like, his father, Jack, is actually a phenomenal coach, and if you ever get the opportunity to, you know, young coaches coming through, to listen to him, and his perspective on coaching is very, very impressive. But that's the family motto: attack the day with an enthusiasm unknown to mankind. You've
obviously done that with your career. You start out in Scottstown in Monaghan as a woodwork teacher. Now, the most highly qualified woodwork teacher in the history of the planet, it seems, with a PhD. But how do you go from there to running the athletic program, one of the biggest football schools in America?
Well, it wasn't planned like that, but it's a passion. Like, I mean, just like any of us, we have a huge passion for sport, and at some stage, my plan was to teach from 9 to 4 and then go and coach. That's all I wanted to do. And having finished, the reason I stayed on to do a PhD was because college, university allowed me to continue to read and study sports science, and I would use my free time to go and travel, visit different programs. And one of them, to make a long story quite short, ended up being Bolton Wanderers, where at the time Big Sam was leaving. They needed, or some of their staff were needing, Big Sam needed some people to help him. And just through my travels, I'd learned certain things that he needed or the program needed.
Was your travel designed to meet people to open doors, or was it just designed to suck their information and it kind of happened symbiotically?
Not even suck their information, just to learn. And what I'd found, even through meeting coaches, were when you go to the cutting edge, when you go to coaches who are actually performing, such as Mico, even Mico Dwyer was one that I went to go and to visit and see. He had been at Kildare at the time, and just to see what he was doing as opposed to what you would read. And I realised very, very quickly that when you go and find the coaches who are actually doing it, it's very different from what you read and study. And that's what I found was my fastest way to learn. And
why did they let you in? Why did everybody say, "Yeah, Grant, come on"?
People will let you in. People generally are. There's only one person I think has ever refused, to or ignored a request.
Can you tell us
the All Blacks? No, I won't.
Was it the Monaghan football team?
No, Johnny Sexton knows who he is. But no, but like, you mean no, you'd be amazed. People who, if you genuinely, my interest is genuinely in learning and studying. It's a passion. It's not for no other reason. And like the All Blacks, Canterbury Crusaders, all of those different teams were just happy to share. But also, you're also, when you go to visit these people to learn, you open your books. And if I'd been with a sprint coach, I remember with the All Blacks, I would share all my notes with them, and they wanted to learn, because one of the big things that coaches, one of the biggest disadvantages that you have if you're working full-time with the team is it's difficult to go and visit. So if some Irish guy comes who's been to visit a sprint coach or a strength coach, and you're happy to share information. So that's how it took off, I guess.
So they feel like you're coming in, it can be a bit of a consultancy for them in some ways. It's like, so what is Charlie Francis doing with Ben Johnson that we can actually learn for our backs? Correct. That kind of stuff.
Exactly, yeah.
That bit is all really amazing. I kind of wanted to ask you really about it seems to me there's very few jobs in Ireland that you could have actually got to a point where you could have done this and enjoyed yourself and had that level of professional development. And I'm coming around to the notion that we don't really value coaching in Ireland that much. That there's a tradition of like paying outside managers who have a bit of a reputation or a bit of celebrity, who will come into a small GAA club and take their 250 quid a session, when actually there are probably a bunch of younger people in the building or in the area who, if we trained to be a coach and gave them the skills and the facilities and the talent development, that would be far better spending the money on that. But we don't really value coaching that much. We're much more get that quick fix, get that celebrity in, get that whiff of somebody who's got a few medals. They know all about it, as opposed to actually, this is a science.
Yeah, I guess it's often the prophet in their own land. There's a little bit of that as well. But you do, when you travel, you learn quickly. You learn from outside experiences, and but I think that Ireland's unique. I think the Gaelic Games are unique. There's nowhere else in the world that has a sport like that, and. I spoke to the AFL Coaches Association a few years ago, and I stressed upon them the importance of the sport for society and for culture. It's not a business, in this country. What we have is very, very different, and we often look abroad, perhaps, as that being the aspiration, when that's not really what we should be looking at.
Yeah. What about that notion of coaching? Do we put enough value in coaching? Not to get me wrong, I think that Pat Daly and his team in the GAA and that network of coaches that they've built, that's an amazing thing, and they're doing brilliant work. But like the rest of the country, and I think it holds true for a lot of other sports as well, probably needs to look at it and go, these guys, they're the ones with the intelligence, and they're the ones holding the coaching conferences, getting people over to have those conversations and present to them and learn from people. But most of the rest of the sport is like, I'd much rather have the guy with a couple of All-Irelands than the guy who's done the coaching course.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, because I think that a lot of when you look back traditionally over the great coaches we've had, they haven't come through traditional coaching pathways, or they haven't been there, but their insight and their intelligence, it's common among the greats that I would have come across outside of Ireland. So perhaps we don't value that intelligence, I guess, or that coaching ability enough.
when you've been meeting all these people, particularly earlier on in your days, just coming back to this exact point, do you feel that they've benefited more in their coaching expertise from their learned experiences, from their own things, from making it to the top of their game, potentially as former players, or do you think they learn more from the books they read, or from doing courses and from essentially academics?
I think that the best coaches that the coaches that I've felt have been most successful are those who've had learned more from life, from spending more time understanding people, being able to read people, being able to manage people. I think the most successful coaches in history generally have had teaching backgrounds, ironically, to date. I think one of the disadvantages of people rushing straight into coaching is that they have just this one singular mindset. They've only been taught in a particular way. Many coaches who have, for example, Mourinho was a coach, was a teacher. Carlos Queiroz was initially started as a teacher as well. Alex Ferguson ran a bar. That experience, that life experience, cannot be underestimated. When you have to deal with people in difficult situations, manage groups, those skill sets are arguably more beneficial in the long run than going straight into coaching. One of the I guess, advantages that I have had in my career is that when you come up against other people who have gone straight into sports science or gone straight into coaching, everybody in that stream have been taught in a particular way. So everybody in the room is going to come up with the same answer. When you find somebody who has come to it late or with a different background, different experience, they tend to look at things a little bit differently.
You say that the two questions you ask everybody you meet is, who's the most impressive person you've met and what's the best book you've ever read? Who's the most impressive person you've ever met and what's the best book you've ever read?
Charlie Francis was probably the brightest guy that I
really
came across.
But
yeah.
Ben Johnson was a cheat.
Yeah, but
so that's really fascinating, because we had Ben Johnson on the show and everyone's like, oh, you can't have Ben Johnson on the show, but actually he's got an amazing story. So what was that like? Charlie,
and if you watch the Dublin Inquiry, Charlie's basic argument was that he had to come to a decision what to do with Ben, either to win everything up until the races that mattered when he would come up against cheats or not. But as just in terms of an intelligence, there are very few people I've come across who have had that level of intelligence, the ability, and a wonderful. He used to say all the time that the only problem with common sense is it's not that common. He had a brilliant ability to be very practical, very pragmatic in terms of solving problems.
Even though ultimately he decides to dope his
yeah. And
other than that though, did he have other stuff beyond?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. He would. Originally, I went to him to study. Only went to study sprint technique, so how to basically take team sport athletes. And I went with film to him of team sport athletes, and just his ability to break down, as the player accelerated, why they went more to the left, why they went, and just his insight, his ability to study the body, and to be able to draw those things and then go back and fix players' running technique, improve them. And to draw on those things is unique. There are very few people around the world who can do it or who've been able to do it since.
Yeah, and the book?
Oh, I've read so many. I think the one most recently,
apart from your own, obviously.
Apart from my own, The Team of Teams by Stanley McChrystal has been the one I think that most recently I found fascinating. Which again is very important in sport, because what you have at the minute, you've got so many specialists just trying to become experts in different areas, but the ability to draw it together is the most important thing in sport now.
How did you end up working with the Dubs?
So I'd worked with Bernard Dunn, and Bernard had said to me, look, do you remember Jim Gavin, who played for Dublin? Of course, yeah, I did. He said, well, he's over the under-21s, would you meet him? And I met him here one Saturday when I was home. I was working with Liverpool at the time. I was home, and we just met in a hotel, and he showed me what he was doing with the under-21s and just on the analysis, and we spent some time going through it, and then he would send me some stuff after different games, and I would send him back based on the analysis they were doing, what I thought the game looked like, because I obviously didn't see it, and it was a very interesting exercise, because if I couldn't describe the game from the statistics, perhaps they weren't analysing which is the complete opposite. We look at the game and then try and come up with stats, and that's how it started. And then I get a call one night in Liverpool. Get a call one night to say that he was thinking of putting his hat in the ring, and would I be interested in getting involved. And that's how it took off.
So did you come back from Liverpool, or did you double jobs?
Travel back and forth, yeah.
Okay, right. Yeah. And what did you do for the Dubs? So at that point, that's before you become an operations director, effectively.
Yeah, so Jim was basically starting from scratch with Dublin. So we would have sat down at the beginning, and he would have asked me, look, what are your thoughts? How would you build this from the ground up? And he obviously had a very successful program with the under-21s, and I shared with him my experience in rugby and soccer, and yes, this is what I would do, and some of the things were, and the great thing about with Jim is just his humility. He was willing to listen to and to argue and take things on board. He would take some things he wouldn't, but an incredibly his greatest trait is his humility, which I don't know if that comes across, but
I think it does. I mean, obviously, I'd be interested to hear you and Kimmage have that conversation now.
We've had that conversation.
Fair enough, because in the Kimmage piece you said that you would have big arguments in that Dublin setup, and that's because obviously it's always a united face that gets put forward in any great team. None of that stuff ever really. We don't really understand that happens. What are you debating? Is it about the training, how you're getting the players to peak for that period of time that they need to peak? Yeah,
and when we talk about arguments, we're talking about really respectful debates, and I feel strong about this or whatever, and it never gets. There's no animosity. Yeah. But that was because there was, when you look at the characters that you have, Declan Darcy, Mick Deegan. In that, you argue your point, but you know that the most important thing is that we as a group agree on a particular thing, and also, there were things, I was wrong about certain players or whatever, and you have to respect that.
Your job was to make sure that everybody was fit and healthy and performing. Was it?
My job was more as an advisor, consultant to them. They had their own training staff, their own coaching staff, and it was essentially to act as a consultant to them, because I couldn't be there all the time.
Okay, so somebody else was kind of putting the plans.
Yeah, Martin Kennedy was doing the training. You had Jim, Mick, they were coaching. Yeah, and it was from an overall perspective. Look, I think, or if they had an issue, Fergus, what do you think? Is this a problem? And sometimes the problem that you see is not is not the original one. So, for example, if you start to struggle to score late in the game, well, it may not be fitness, it may be something earlier on in the game that you're not more efficient, so you don't have that energy at the game. So it's being able to ask better questions of the group as a whole, so that we come to the right conclusion.
Is that the thing that separates them? That they're not a pre-programmed team, that actually they are emboldened or empowered to make decisions for themselves?
Yeah, I think one of the things that with the All Blacks, Canterbury Crusaders, even the great teams that I've been around, their players tend to be at the end of their career the most intelligent players. But they don't start off as intelligent players, but you have to empower them to continue to learn. And even Graham Henry would talk about, he knew when his teams were getting to the brink of greatness, because they would make changes or alterations before he would see it. And that's really what you're trying to do. The one advantage or disadvantage, I guess, in American football is that because the quarterback's wired to the head coach, there's that constant ability to interact. In soccer, and you want to sit back and allow them to continue to learn so that they can make the changes. Because you can't, this isn't PlayStation, you just can't make those changes. So you want your players to be the most intelligent and adaptable. That's the key thing, is adaptable.
And how do you do that on a practical level?
You do it in practice, and it's not a smart answer, but that's what you do in practice. You create the scenarios where they have to solve problems, you know, at that point in time, and you go through the very same review process post-practice as you would at post-game. And so, you know, there is no difference between practice and a game. There's no difference. You have to treat it the same way.
That's why you say warm weather training is bullshit, because it's like a week out of your normal routine. It's like a holiday, effectively, from the good habits that you're trying to get people into.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, I think that obviously, you know, everything depends. But yeah, for the most part, and the other point to it, Dublin is, you know, it's Dublin. It's the capital. You don't need to go somewhere warm to find somewhere new in Dublin, and it's more important to continue to have that routine built up so that you perform each week than it is to go somewhere.
What's the ceiling for this Dublin team then?
It's up to somebody else to stop them, really. I think I think you're looking at. I think they have to be admired. You know, I haven't been with them for 2 years now or so, but you have to admire what they've done. And I think the thing that I'm happiest about watching them is how they carry themselves on and off the field, because that in the long run for young kids coming through in Dublin or for any county, I think that's to be admired. You know, that's the most important thing, that humility.
And it makes them sustainable. It means that the next group of players coming through, I think Leinster Rugby have it now, that bunch of kids who are coming through are all like, look, I've done nothing yet, you know, there's lads in there with 3 European Cups.
Yeah, they used to talk about that, about the great Kerry teams, same with the All Blacks, same with Crusaders, where the goal is not success, it's not to win one All-Ireland. The goal is to have sustainable success, to win All-Irelands. That is the goal. It should always be the goal to win more than one, not just one.
And was that always the mindset of Jim Gavin? Do you feel that the two of you had that thing on a level par, that you both went in there thinking, right, we've got the same ideal here, long-term success?
Yeah.
You're very similar people.
Yeah, to absolutely dominate. Like, I mean, there's no other way to win. But you have to, yeah, it's a mindset. And you have to, again, it comes back to being able to agree to disagree, to find a pathway to win.
So why do you hate Mayo so much?
Oh no, I love Mayo. I was asked. Paul asked me about it, and I was. I'd love to see Mayo win All Ireland. But I like it. I think it's.
It sounds like backtracking now, Fergus. Come on.
No. It's in the piece where it was at a league semi-final. Their coach, I forget the guy's name. We were going down the elevator at half time. We were down a man. They were up a few points, and you know, the head coach and the manager was making smart comments towards a stats intern, and I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned. It's half time, game's not over, and I couldn't understand why you just wouldn't be a little bit more humble or cautious or respectful even. But no, I think, you know, Mayo have done exceptionally well, and it's difficult for them to come through, and they've had a lot of success as well. You know, it's unfair to judge them just on losing All-Ireland finals, but you know, they've been very successful.
Yeah, no, that's a bit different from what you said. That they're never going to win one.
Yeah. And
you stand by that. You don't think they are going to win one?
I think in order to win, in order to be successful, you have to have that humility. Where two things: you have to be respectful of your opponent, and you have to be able to, you know, beat them, but respect, because you can't lose sight of the fact that they come so close. And secondly, as a team, then you have to look after your own teammates and give credit to the group as a whole. I think when you have those two things, I think then you build upon that, and you can have success.
And so they don't have that. You used the example of Aidan O'Shea going on the TV show, but Jackie Tyrrell went on the TV show and won All Ireland afterwards, and he clearly is part of that Kilkenny team that has that endless amount of success. Is it okay for him to do it because he's won the All-Irelands already, and not for Aidan because he hasn't?
Well, Paul asked me the same thing. I think, you know, when you've been there, when you've done that, then it's easier to do it. Yeah. It
does. You feel like it actually stops the group from meshing to a point where they have that unlimited or unbreakable trust?
I think that when, particularly from a media point of view, whether it's the head coach or players, it doesn't matter. When somebody does an interview, their teammates are paying arguably more attention to that interview than the outsiders are, and how how humble are you? How much credit do you give? And they, like, I mean, when you see players interviewed, smart players will give credit to the team. They don't talk, they misdirect or they redirect the question to talk about the support. And that's what...
It makes a very bad copy, though. No, we don't actually get to know the players. I mean, I guess...
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is where
Richie McCaw is a classic example. You know, Richie, you'd ask Richie a question and
we don't know anything about McCaw, really, like as a person. Yeah.
But you do know his legacy.
Yeah.
And again, you're looking at it from a different perspective, but from the head coach's perspective, this is what you want. You want somebody who will bring the team together, keep that thread, so that the team as a whole is respected.
I would say Mayo have a fair bit of that. Like, I think that maybe there's just a generational shift where players actually have this profile, and that's a lot of that is like given back to. It seems like they're giving a bit of themselves, and so we actually get to know them and we support them a bit more. As a manager, you're like, no, I don't want any of that stuff. I don't care if people are on your side. That it's the message to the team that's more important. I
think at the end of the day, the team have to get across the line. And once that's achieved, then you can, you know.
Fair game.
But it's about at the end of the day, the goal is to win. And in 10, 15 years' time, when people look back on the history of success, there will be names on the trophy. It won't be about who's done interviews or who's done whatever.
Yeah, okay. It's a fairly hardcore view, and it's good to hear that from the inside, because like the managers will never tell us that. They'll be like, look, it's up to the players. And some managers have a fairly open door policy when it comes to doing interviews, because they feel that it allows the players to express themselves, and that's actually part of their evolution as a person. It gets them to the point where they can think on their feet. And again, it's part of that turning them into people who, when a hard question arrives in the middle of a match, they're actually able to solve it because maybe they've been practicing that aspect of their brain. It sounds like you don't really believe any of
that. As you know, as an athlete or as a coach, your job is to win, and that's where it starts and ends. And if media or if different things become a distraction, split a group, then you have issues, and maybe those things aren't portrayed enough. You know what I mean in media.
Do you think you would have changed your opinion had Mayo won the All-Ireland last year?
I would have had to, wouldn't I? I would love to see Mayo. Paul asked me, asked me my thoughts, and like I say, until if you've got a team that is humble, if you've got a team that has that approach, they're very dangerous to beat. Very, very dangerous to beat.
And there's a couple of other things I wanted to ask you, because you did a piece with Michael Moynihan, I think, in 2016, where you talked about the GPA and their silence on the issue of what GAA people call burnout, but which you broke down into 3 separate categories, because burnout obviously isn't very scientific, and that actually if they were to agitate for the proper management, for a legislative framework which prevented players from training/playing too much, then this might have an impact on some of the mental health issues that they're talking about, on some of the other things that are issues for them. Could you just explain to us a little bit about that? Because it would be good to get a bit of science out into the public debate.
Well, one of the misconceptions are that burnout is purely just either a psychological or a physical thing. You can overtrain somebody, and people will tend to break down in 2 ways. Broadly speaking, some people will break down physically first. Others have a great tolerance for physical load, and then they'll start to suffer psychologically, and that's insidious. It takes longer to appear. So it's quite difficult for people to track these things. If the role of the GPA is to be, to protect the player, I would argue that their primary goal is to try and look after the player. And what you're looking for there is you're looking for both legislation and education. So this goes back to your coaching question about, how well do we educate coaches? And a lot of these things we're only learning about them. We're only learning about them at the minute, and it's how do you track those things for players, because everybody's coming from different backgrounds. But that education piece is as important as simply having, winter bands or winter workout bands. So
just there was an example recently, Derek Honan, the Clare hurler, like a sensational underage hurler, who ultimately does win an All-Ireland and plays his role for Clare winning their All-Ireland, retires at the age of 27, but hasn't basically played that much for the last 2 years, with successive hip injuries, that he can kind of pinpoint a summer where they just did loads of training, and he would be coming off going, look, I don't really think I should be doing it, and they'd be like, get out there. This is the culture. We're all going to do this together. We're going to live or die by this together. And you feel like that example could be made far more a case of, as a test case, by somebody like the GPA saying, this is what's happening to our best players. This guy should have another 6 to 8 years in the full forward line, winning games for Clare, inspiring the whole country, you know, all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure that we all kind of understand what having a 21-year-old play Sigerson and potentially Fitzgibbon and wanting to be a dual under 21 player, and then the senior team comes and the senior club team and the under 21 club team, what that's actually doing to people.
And the sad part is that if it was properly planned, you could probably play all those games. You just can't do the training. And the worst thing about bans, and we see it in the NFL as well, where you've got a long off season, guys come back into training camps and then they get a sudden flood of injuries. It's not the games that are the problem, it's the training. It's the excessive training and the excessive training loads. If you play games and they're managed, those minutes are managed, the players, and there have been studies done in basketball again where people who've played the most games, regardless of sport, have fewer injuries for the first 2 years in the NBA. And it's because the player is alert, fully focused in a game, there are less chances of injury. The training very often is not as organised or probably not as focused. Maybe, and you've got two things in training, not to get too scientific. You've got volume, which is just the duration, the amount of work, and then you've got the intensity, which is the peak, the sprinting. The intensity is never the killer. It's generally always the amount of work, the total minutes, the total miles. And that's usually what causes the injury, and that's usually where the breakdown comes.
Legislation has not fixed this issue in stuff like the contact sports in America, particularly in the NFL, for example, you're only allowed a certain amount of padded practices and you're only allowed a certain amount of access to the players. If we were to limit the amount of access to the players that inter-county teams have and get the players to enforce it, they can just be in a WhatsApp group, WhatsApp the GPA going, we heard that X county trained that night, and then a fine comes down from Croke Park and it automatically happens. That might be the way to wipe it out.
Yes, the only problem there is that if it becomes, an aggressive type of approach, that then, people become insecure and then coaches start to threaten players. But it's better if it can become a consultative approach, whereby, the coaches themselves or the manager, whichever, are educated as to, look, you don't need to do this. We can still achieve our, whatever it might be, psychological toughness. We don't need to do 17 nights in a row or whatever these, you hear these stories. There are ways to achieve what it is you're trying to achieve, in a smarter way. And that's where the education aspect is. And just to go back, briefly back to Dublin, to do what Dublin have done, or even Mayo, any of these great teams, they're obviously not doing, what you're talking about. They're managing the loads better, so they don't. But it borders on abuse, the hip injuries, and this has been going for a long time. The hip surgeries and the number of teams, it's worrisome for the game.
Is it just ignorance driving that?
I wouldn't say it's just ignorance.
It's a bunch of ignorance and ego and that kind of stuff. Somewhat,
and bear in mind as well, you've got coaches who come in, take over a team. They're under severe pressure to get results straight away, but a lot of it is just having that education to understand. Look, I've got, and also being able to manage key resources, so that you can, there are certain, I call them a McCraven principle, where you've got certain key players that will determine your season. If you don't protect those, you won't have them later in the season.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned the new managers coming in and needing to get results straight away. We've seen stories over the last couple of weeks of Pat Gilroy with the Dublin Hurlers taking people out, doing double sessions a day, bringing them out at 6 a.m. multiple times a week. Davy Fitz did it last year as well. Ultimately, we might not see the results of what Davy did last year with them. I mean, like, bad results up until this year, maybe next year. Is that a worry in your opinion as well, that these things might be a new phenomenon again, that suddenly pre-season's got to be more intense, more training sessions?
I think you have to be very careful when you take things out of context. I mean, you could be doing 2-a-days, and I've done 2-a-days, but it depends what you're actually doing.
It could be half an hour.
And it could be, it could be half an hour. And also, the simple fact of getting somebody in at 6:30 sets a precedent. You can get them up at 6:30 and do a stretching session, do a yoga session. So, and that's where the education, that's where having all of the information is very, very important. But
I have a feeling Mickey Whelan's involved with the Dubs. I have a feeling everything's being done pretty well there.
Yeah, Mickey's. There's an incredibly bright guy as well. Yeah, I would be, and the question you have to ask is, who would you trust your son and daughter to coach? Mickey would be one.
Yeah, totally. We're going to do a gym versus gym in a minute. This is our little gimmick to see is it Gavin or Harbaugh. But before I do, I just want to ask you about Colin Kaepernick, because obviously you were at the 49ers when Kaepernick was there with Harbaugh ripping it up. What's your experience with Colin Kaepernick?
I've been around a lot of professional athletes in many different sports. I've never been around anybody as polite to everybody on the staff as Colin Kaepernick. I can't say a bad word about him. I cannot say a bad word about him. And people, you hear so many different people speak about him, and take the issue out of it just as a person. You can't criticise him as a person, whether you agree with what he did or is doing. And then if you follow him, it's no surprise to me when you follow the money that he has given to the different charities. The fact he has stayed silent as well. To me, he's always been a very polite person. You would see him speak to the janitor, turn around and speak to the janitor when there's nobody else in the locker room, the exact same way as he would speak to the head coach. Yeah,
I think he's a legend. I just think that what he's done, and to have that courage, and to effectively throw away millions and millions of dollars, it's pretty amazing. So, and I'm glad he comes across as this unbelievably humble person despite the talent that he has.
Mm-hmm. And I've seen him in situations where, he would be leaving crowds and, people are badgering him, and he will give the same patience to all those different people.
Will he come back? Can you come back to the NFL after the period of time that he's out?
I think he can, because I would get to work at shortly after 6, and his car would be there. You know what I mean? There are very few people who I've seen work as hard as him. So any other athletes I would question, but he worked exceptionally hard, always did. I'm sure he still is. So other athletes, other quarterbacks, yeah, you'd doubt.
Yeah.
But not him. And he's quite young still.
Yeah, totally.
Are you surprised by what's happened?
I'm surprised that the NFL have allowed it to get to the stage it's got to, yeah. And I'd hope that it would change just for the sport itself, because I think that, I think everybody just let it get out of hand. It could have been solved an awful lot quicker.
Yeah. Okay.
So basically, we wanted to ask you a lot of things about Jim Gavin, a lot of things about Jim Harbaugh as well. So we're going to do a quick Jim versus Jim segment here. It's nothing, well, it is quite gimmicky, I guess. We've got an image there set up and everything, and it's just yes or no questions. We might ask a few follow-ups at the end of you if you give us any particular answer. So there's 10 questions here, and essentially, which Jim would you pick? So first of all, who pays closer attention to sport outside of their own field of expertise?
Jim Gavin.
Who's more hands-on with details within their own field?
Jim Harbaugh, yeah. Jim Harbaugh coaches a lot, yeah.
Who reads more books?
Jim Gavin.
Who watches more films and TV?
Jim Harbaugh.
Who thinks about the media more?
Oh, I'm not even sure about that one, actually. It's a draw. We'll give them both.
Who looks after their own body more?
I'll give it to Jim Harbaugh, but it's pretty close.
Who would have a better chance of success, Harbaugh in the GAA or Gavin in the NFL?
That would be a heck of a final. I've no idea.
Who's more likely to go into a career in politics?
Oh, Coach Harbaugh, yeah.
And who cares about their legacy more?
Coach Harbaugh, yeah.
And then a final point, who would you put your last tenner on? A Jim Harbaugh team 1 score behind in a Super Bowl with 2 minutes to play, or a Jim Gavin team 1 score behind with 1 minute to play in an All-Ireland final?
Oh, Coach Harbaugh. Yeah.
Would you?
Yeah.
But Jim Gavin's done it, and Harbaugh didn't.
Exactly.
Oh, so he's got to do it again. Yeah. Okay. All right.
This time round, yeah.
Were you with the Niners in the Super Bowl?
No.
You came after that. Yeah.
Went downhill then.
Yeah. What was that environment like when you went into it afterwards? Because it felt like they weren't finished. It felt like they still. I mean, they weren't, because they got to the championship game the next year with the Sherman.
Yeah. It was some of the players there were phenomenal, like Justin Smith, Alden Smith, Patrick Willis and Navarre Bowman. Some of the greatest players that have played the game. And an incredibly special organisation as well. The opportunity to, sit and have lunch with Keane Turner with, 4 or 5 Super Bowl rings, and to be able to pick the brains and to learn from those people. Special time.
It was a real pity that falling out happened the way it did. At one stage there were literally separate changing rooms because that
was. Yeah, and again, this is something that was blown out of proportion. What had happened were that we were building, the new stadium was finished.
Yeah.
and we were able to move into both. And some of the older players were just really content in the old locker rooms, which were, literally 50 yards apart. So it wasn't as big a deal. But again, it was
afterwards. Everything becomes a huge deal when that happens.
And then people are walking by. Well, that must have been the issue. That must have been the cause.
In the end, everybody lost.
Yes, as the golden goose was killed. Yeah.
Yeah, particularly the 49ers.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, Fergus, this has been great. Thanks very much. Is there anything else, any other State of the Nation issues that you'd like to bring up on your little black book?
No. Any good questions you've got? I think we've just, I think it'll be. I can't wait until Mayo win the All-Ireland. We
have a load of questions. People asking, is it ever too late to get into coaching, and about your book as well. So your book is available on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Anywhere else?
Game Changer, Barnes and Noble.
There's Jim reading it.
yeah.
Did I say that?
He wrote the foreword. No, but it was great to get the opportunity to put everything from all the different sports, from rugby, soccer, football, and I need to get you a copy for here.
Yeah, totally. We'll stick it up on the back.
Just because it's been 2 years since you've been home, and we might not be speaking to you again for a while. What's your dream job? Are you in it at the moment?
Yeah, I've never had a plan. For me, I just love coaching, love helping coaches, and love helping kids, because I think it was when I grew up, when I was playing, I just had so many questions. I started playing football late, and I wanted to learn. When I wasn't the fastest, I would try and read what I could about speed to get better.
Yeah.
And
if the GPA came to you and asked for some help on what the guidelines they should be trying to get legislated for, is that the type of thing you'd be open to doing?
Yes, but the GPA have.
Or are you so anti the GPA?
No, I'm not anti GPA. I just think that it's a very wealthy organisation that could. I think there's better ways maybe to handle those finances and to support the players. I think the other thing too is this sport is the Gaelic games are such a special sport culturally and societally for this country. It needs to be protected as such. This idea of a Super 8, this elitism is, will be to the detriment of Irish society.
It's funny how you're on that side of it when actually your day job is to get people to be as good as they possibly can, which
because I know the downsides of elitism and professionalism in other sports. And I had this conversation with the AFL as well, and I explained to them, and they're in complete agreement. The fabric of the G is part of the fabric of this society. It is not and should not be an elite sport.
How do you stop the dubs getting bigger and bigger and better and keep the people who are going training in Scottstown happy? These two things seem like they're, at the moment, the link between them is so taut that it could spring at any time.
You see, I disagree. I think that what Dublin have been able to do is that is the aspiration for clubs around the country, is to achieve that level. When I was involved with Dublin, you would hear rumours of money being paid and sets of gear. The Dubs got exactly what every other team got in terms of gear, in terms of there were no warm weather training camps. So when you have that kind of program here, learn the lessons as opposed to criticising and that's the important point.
I agree with that, but the amount of money that has been pumped into Dublin to help them to get to that point can't be pumped into every other county.
Yeah, so it's obviously whatever funding has to be distributed in a manner that supports, but again, it has to support the country. These are the Gaelic games. It's incredibly important for our society. It can't, if it just feeds this elitism, well then you're just going to end up like rugby is in the UK. And the downsides of that professionalism are very, very worrying for society across the board. Because if you take the NFL and American football, what you have is you've got a sport that's played primarily by a minority across the board.
As in that it's essentially geared towards elitism. There is no other way. If you're not making it to the top, you're not playing the game.
Correct. And it's only, the game is restricted to certain areas in the States.
Yeah, and ultimately, that hasn't helped anybody really.
Yeah, and what is the role of Gaelic games in Ireland? That's the question. The question is not how much money can it make. The question is not should it compete with the Premiership. The question really is what is the role of Gaelic games for Irish society? Yeah,
and it doesn't really feel like that question is foremost all the time.
I think we lose track of it. I think because we always assume that the NFL is or the NBA is where we should go. Well, it's not quite. It shouldn't be.
Fergus, great stuff. Thanks very much. And
thank you guys.
Continued success and congratulations on everything. And Hopefully Michigan have a winning season next year and end up in a bowl game. Right, Cork Camogie captain Aoife Murray joined us in studio yesterday afternoon around the launch of the Littlewoods Ireland Camogie Leagues. The 2018 season throws in this weekend as the reigning league champions Kilkenny travel to Clare and the All-Ireland champions Cork begin with a clash against Galway. We're going to be with Aoife in a moment, but first, Oisin Langan caught up with the Galway star Rebecca Henley down at the launch. Have a look.
A bit of upheaval with the management team going into 2018. Has that had any effect? Is that a bad thing? I mean, I know that you've got management in place now and you're fully behind them, but it's not ideal as elite players, as players who have competed for All-Irelands, for that to be going on, is it?
We have new management again. I suppose it's our third or fourth year of new management. It takes a bit of getting used to it, but I suppose that's the league is for. Something we can do, we're there to play, so that's what we'll do. So just looking forward to the league.
And I appreciate that as players all you want to do is play and you can't really get involved, but do you think maybe that something should be put in motion that this doesn't keep happening, management doesn't keep chopping and changing?
Yeah, maybe it should, maybe they should get a chance to, 2 or 3 years, whatever, they should get a chance, but I suppose it's not, as I said, it's not up to us, so we can't do anything about it, so we're just there to play. So
yeah. And you do have a recent All-Ireland win. I mean, it's not like you're waiting since 88 like the men last year, so the confidence should be high. You can surely take from that because there's a lot of those players still around.
Yeah, we won in 2013 and we won the intermediate the same year. I was actually on the intermediate team that year to soak for the seniors. A few players gone from that senior wing, but we still have a lot of players left. It seems like a long time ago now, since 2013, but I'm sure we'll get it right. We have lots of young players coming through and we're a fairly young team, so we're just looking forward to getting going again, I suppose.
All right, we're turning our attention to Camogie, and Aoife Murray, the Cork goalkeeper, is here with us because the leagues were launched yesterday amidst much fanfare even. How are you getting on? You were saying outside that this was definitely the busiest and most well populated and the most media attention that you've seen for one of these launches. Yeah,
definitely, and I suppose it's just maybe a sign of where the game is going and the attention that it's getting. I think last year's final probably got a lot of publicity, and maybe it was a good way of leading into this year's league campaign. And to be fair to Littlewoods as well, they're really pushing their sponsorship of the National League. But not only from them, but there was a lot of media out there as well. Which I think it's a great kind of sign of respect to Camogie.
The attention around last year's All-Ireland final was mostly because it turns out the two teams hate each other.
Well, apparently so. I don't really buy into that side of it. Give us the good gossip. To be fair, right, I know the media love it, and it's a great story for the media as well. We all hate each other, and
good sport is built on good rivalries, though. Every great sport that has become a great sport has somewhere along the way where, Larry Bird against Magic Johnson turns NBA into mainstream in America.
Yeah, I suppose maybe it has come around at a good time with more attention as well from the media. And, all the little bits ins and outs. Is Gemma going to play? Is she not? Paddy saying, well, can he play a certain way? Well, we're going to have, and all that kind of stuff. It feeds quite really well into maybe the more attention that's being turned to Camogie. So maybe that whole rivalry has come at a really good time. But I have to say, I actually didn't really know the Kilkenny girls until we went to Madrid on our first All-Stars trip. And you know what? And I know the media won't like this bit, but they're actually a great bunch of girls.
Well, that's the worst thing that could have happened. You guys all going on a trip together and making friends.
We'll all just hug it out on the pitch.
Well, it's terrible because, well, I know the Cork hurlers, there's a famous story from Donal Logue's book about, in a lift, there's some kind of, not quite a schmozzle with the Kilkenny hurlers at that time, but certainly there's an incident in a lift. And I'm the whole point of these All-Star trips is so that you can nurse your grudge as opposed to making friends.
Yeah, I think the only incident we had was in a taxi trying to find the hotel. That was probably the only incident that we really had. But sometimes it's actually good to get to know people, because maybe you'll actually work harder because you realise just how good they are. Yeah. You thought they were good until you actually got to spend a bit more time with them, and maybe I walked away with going, you know what, I thought they were good Camogie players. They're actually great Camogie players. So that feeds into really well into getting back onto the pitch.
Because that was the thing Donal Logue was saying, was almost a competition with Davy on one of those All-Star trips, and that was a big controversy about that. And suddenly, of course, everybody has their own internal competition within the county, but then suddenly everybody in every position, despite the fact that you're all All-Ireland winners from the Cork perspective, suddenly you're seeing the best people in your position and breeding some familiarity with them.
Yeah, absolutely. It was me versus Emma, and to be fair, she won on that one because she left in less goals than me. But of course, it's great because you're seeing your kind of opposite number, and you're going, I thought I worked hard there, but I'm going to have to work seriously harder next year if I want to try and be the best. But at the same time, sure, that's great. Like, it just sauce, you know.
It's hard for us to believe that anybody would outwork you, given that you train in Dublin, but obviously play for Cork and travel up and down quite a lot. That actually the level of commitment that you have to make is relatively high.
I suppose it is if you're the outside looking in, but when you're just used to doing it, like, you know, I'm used to just getting to the car at 3:30 on a Friday or on a Tuesday, and if I'm not in the car at 3:30, I've no hope of getting to training. But I'm very lucky as well that, like, you know, there's some weeks where I can't do that, and my teammates trust me that I'm doing my own work up here. But I know a lot of people thinks like it's a bit bananas doing it, and I know my work colleagues have no idea why or how I do it. But it's actually probably one of the best hour and a half during the week is when I get down to training, just to get out on the pitch.
And is it just yourself? Because I know Micheál O'Hurty talks about training with Jack O'Shea and a few of the Kerry lads. Actually, I think about it just being Jack O'Shea for a certain point, so there's a mirror there, but certainly at one point there was a few of them living up here and they were training together, but it's just you in isolation with a trainer, isn't it? Yeah,
just me. A few years back, to be fair, Rena Buckley, when she was in college, we used to go out to UCD and we do our own sessions together. The gym is actually up here. Jim O'Connor's up at the moment doing a course in UCC through the Army. So we're going to probably start getting out in the pitch when she gets back up from placement, which is great, actually. It'll be great to have somebody else
hit the ball
rather than just going off your...
Hugging your shots.
Yeah.
Soft shots,
so, yeah, no, it is just me, which probably works for a goalkeeper. Maybe a bit better because we're kind of used to the maybe being a little bit more isolated than the rest of the girls.
Yeah.
So it probably suits me better that I can get like one-to-one on my own, if I can, that is. And, well, listen, sometimes you're on your own anyway in the pitch, so you have to get used to it, and it's actually probably good training.
You're injured at the minute. You've a cartilage issue.
I don't know, is it old age or what? But yeah, just have a cartilage issue in my right knee. I've had it for the last couple of years. Had to bandage it up there for the final last year because I just happened to go the weekend before. But I've been to Santry, so I'm due back in another couple of weeks to.
So you've had it cleaned out with the surgery?
Yeah, got it.
I love the way we talk about you had it cleaned out. It kind of sounds like they rinsed it, but it actually like it's cutting and.
Yeah, it was fine actually. I just had to get a cyst drained from the back of the knee and get a lubricant injected into the front of it.
Okay, so it's not too bad.
No, just to hopefully that will stop the swelling and the grating and being able to jump, you know, those little fundamentals.
Yeah, completely. So when your work colleagues are saying, so let me get this straight, you drive up and down, you do early morning training sessions mostly on your own, and you need injections in the front of the back of your knee to be able to walk without pain. They go, why the hell are you doing it? What do you actually answer to that?
I know no different. Like, I don't think any player that comes in here, like, that's all they know. And if it means you can get one more game or one more year out of it, like, you'll take a little injection into the knee. Because
you're at that stage now of your career where it is one more year each year. Like, that cliche of, we'll take it one game at a time, you're literally taking it 1 year at a time, I guess, at this stage.
Absolutely. And
because you'd already retired at one point.
Yeah, I think I've learned a lesson of, you know, don't jump in with 2 feet. I had a back injury and it came back. We won the All-Ireland and I kind of went, right, that's your luck. Like, you've ridden your luck there, Aoife. Hand up the boots. Or I think we won 2 actually All-Irelands after it, and I just said, right, now's the time to...
Yeah, it sounds like reasonable.
My brother decided he'd go back and manage. So I was like, right, can't leave the parents down. So I went back and I kind of learnt my lesson of maybe just sit back here, enjoy winter a small bit, and then, you know, take stock of things at Christmas and come back if you want to.
Yeah, like Gordon Darcy was writing in the Irish Times yesterday about the kind of pleasure people get from winning, and that he got his most achievement or his biggest satisfaction from winning just in those few moments, those rare few moments after, say, the Northampton final in the Heineken Cup or the Grand Slam. And it's a very fleeting feeling that as soon as it's done, it's almost like being addicted to something that you want to taste that again.
Yeah.
Like, do you feel the same thing, that you get that fleeting feeling and then as soon as a couple of weeks have passed, you're like, right, time to go again and feel that again?
Yeah, look, I suppose if you win it, like, I never believe in this song of, you know, to win just once would be enough. I think when you win once...
You're from Cork, though. They're from Mayo/Galway.
But you get addicted to that little feeling. You know, I got a chance after the All-Ireland this year because I didn't know whether I was coming back or not to stand in the middle of the pitch and just kind of to take it all in and meet as many people on the pitch as possible and to really appreciate that small moment. And you have this small moment in the dressing room and then you have mad moments on the bus and you can get really addicted to that part of it, and then you do those things of getting injections into your knee and you know driving down to Cork, because I suppose in a way it's like a drug, and if you taste it once you just want to do it again, and it's odd that you have to put in 10 months work just for that little moment, but yeah, it gets really, really addictive.
What's the relationship like with your brother? I have 2 sisters, and we fight occasionally. We have disagreements.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Yeah, I wouldn't fancy having like a sibling on a team where I'm picking the team, and I know that like I'm going to have tough instructions for some people, and I know that like my biggest critic is my sibling going, "Oh, what are you doing that for?"
Yeah, we have some very interesting moments, Paddy and me, and there's 11 of us in our family plus my mum and dad, so we always try to get other people involved as well, just to make a big family argument out of it. Interesting dinners at times. Do you know what? I found it really hard at the start, being straight up about it. I found it difficult because I forgot we'd come from a club situation where he was my trainer, and we got on great, and you know. But I suppose I forgot that we all grew up together. So when Paddy got involved with Cork, I just thought it was going to be the exact same thing, and no differences was going to be taken up Paddy giving out to somebody or having an issue with somebody. But I suppose it's taken probably me more so than the players, like the 5+ years to really figure that out. So now I can kind of get on with it better myself. But I think we've developed a little way of communicating, normally through my brother Damien, who we call Banky Moon, because he's literally the peacekeeper. He'll ring me, then he'll ring Paddy ring Damien will ring me.
It's all grand then.
Yeah, it's all fine, and then we'll finally ring each other.
And are you fighting about tactics, or are you fighting just generally like about the approach to stuff? Or, I mean, because obviously you're a senior player at this stage of your career. You are the captain because the club won the Club All-Ireland as well, so a ridiculously successful period in your career. So you would, like, automatically you would be leaning on somebody of your experience. So what are the disagreements about?
Well, I suppose firstly on the captaincy, unfortunately our club didn't win.
Oh, sorry.
The county, sorry. No, Inniscarra won the county, and normally it is the county team, or the county winning team picks the captain. So I have to seriously thank Inniscarra for passing me the honour. Rena Buckley and Eve McCarthy are from that club, and they nominated me, which was a massive honour and a massive step by Inniscarra. Yeah. Real progressive step by them. Just shows the kind of club they are. But yeah, look, me and Paddy, we butt heads quite a bit, because apparently my sisters say we're very alike, which I don't agree with. We're both stubborn. I'm sure I'm not stubborn at all. We'd argue about silly things. If he says something that I don't like, I'll end up taking an issue with it, and I'll say it straight to him, and then he'll give it back to me, and we'll just get on with it. But at least there's a lot of honesty there. Yeah,
it's grand. That's grand, like in one-on-one, but in team environments, probably you kind of need to allow the manager.
Oh yeah, I've learned to maybe keep it under.
Later.
Yeah, I'll just take a note of that one there.
An email about that.
Come back. I suppose it actually allows me, though, in the dressing room. So, there's situations sometimes where he'll give out to the full back for doing something. And I suppose I feel maybe in a bit more of a comfortable position to put my hand up and be like, no, well, actually, no, Paddy, that was my wrong. I told her to go for the ball. So maybe I have a little bit more confidence in being able to say that to him.
Yeah.
And once I kind of say it to him, he's like, okay, well, listen, okay, that's not the full-back's fault.
Yeah.
We'll deal with that. So it kind of can help in those situations as well.
Was there ever a period in your career where you were perhaps a little bit self-conscious about this? Of course, now you know that you deserve to be in your position, but potentially earlier on in your career where you thought people might view me as somebody who's related to the coach, therefore they might think that I'm getting a favourable opinion here from the coaches, perhaps when you were younger didn't have as much confidence in your own ability?
No, and that's not kind of being full of it or any of that. I was confident in my ability. I felt that I had shown enough by the time Paddy came along. And I think in those situations you just back yourself. And I always felt that if anybody ever questioned me, I would work harder and I'd play better. Where I struggled when Paddy came on board was I started putting massive expectations on my shoulders. So I would say if I drop the ball, I'm not just dropping it for myself, I'm dropping it for Paddy.
Yeah.
Like I'm letting, all of a sudden now there's going to be pressure on him, and he's my brother, I'm the sister, I can't drop this ball. And I didn't realise I was doing that until we got through the league campaign. I actually think we won it, and I was in a ball, like I was completely like doubting myself on absolutely everything. And I remembered my dad pointed an article out to me that Christmas from Caroline
Currid.
Yes, and he happened to pass a comment going, you know what, now she'd be a good woman for you to to talk to, and I played it off like granddad, yeah. And so I actually rang her after the league and did a few sessions with her, and it was only after probably 20 minutes talking to her going, the hell am I doing to myself?
Yeah.
You know, digging a complete hole. And once I started to learn some mechanisms to deal with that side of it, I kind of stopped putting all that kind of pressure because he's the manager.
Was it about the negativity? Paul O'Connell has that whole chapter in his book where he talks about he was this like really negative kind of voice in his own head, and she's like, hang on a second, you're one of the best players in the world. And he started, and it was like, oh, okay. You know, it was like a kind of, the scales fell from his eyes. Well,
that was it to a certain extent with me. When I started talking to her, she was like, everything is negative. Everything is like, you know, it's like the golfer sitting on the tee box, you know, that the mind book or the mind gym book. And they're sitting on the tee box and they say, don't hit it into the water, and you completely hit the ball into the water. And so it was once I started kind of saying what I'm saying in my head out loud, is like that moment where you're going, sure, of course I'm going to drop the ball. You know, what are you doing? When have you actually really dropped the ball, Aoife, you know? And it was a bit of like that moment of going, you got to, you know, just look back at a few games and when did you actually make these big, massive mistakes that I was saying that I'm going to do in my head. When
we were talking to people in advance of this and saying that you were coming in, they all made the point that like you're kind of in that vanguard of Camogie goalkeepers who basically allowed the sport to undergo the same revolution that Gaelic football and hurling have undergone in the last decade, where it's like, I've got the ball, I should be smart with this instead of just poking it long into a 50-50 or probably 40-60 on our turn. So that kind of whole sense of possession is really important. That's going to be my role for this team. When did you realise that it was important not just to poke the ball long?
I think I've always kind of got that. I was very lucky that my brother Kevin played for the Cork Hurlers for years, and he had Ger Cunningham as his goalkeeper, and then he had Donal Logue as the goalkeeper. So when I was a teenager, Kevin was coming back with all these like all these tips and, you know, simple things, you know, having a bag with a hat because I didn't wear a helmet back in the day, and having all those, you know, spare contact lenses, and it was all those little things where maybe at a 15-year-old kid I was beginning to realise that actually, where you would have looked at TV back in the day where you just hit the ball long, you know. And that was actually the same for hurling at that stage, you know.
Totally,
And then Donal Logue came along and transitioned it into a possession game. And I always felt that maybe I could be that person that could do something along those lines. And, you know, I suppose we always talk in Cork that you have to be able to play outfield to be playing goals. So that's how I think it started to come about. And I remember John Considine, I think, was the first manager that I had, that went, no, you're not hitting it long, Aoife. And that's what I was probably known for when I was younger, was I had a good puck out. And he was like, no, can you hit the half back? And I was able to hit the half back. And that's actually how I got my first time starting position, because I was able to maybe play the ball out of defence. I think that was 2004. So I think Donal Logue had just kind of started that the year before, and kind of started from there. Yeah, and so that's where the intelligent design comes into the whole play, and that's actually where the tactical evolution begins to seep into the game, and it's one of the strengths of your team over the last decade or so. We would be very strong on analysis and the stats from the game. Niall Collins does all our stats, so there is no grey area. If you make a mistake, it is there for everybody to see, but if you do something positive, it is there for everybody to see. And like, we knew that, you know, and you don't have to have a great science behind this, like if you can hold more than 50% of your puck outs, there's a good chance that you'll be thereabouts at the end of it. So why would you be hitting a 50-50 ball to a centre fielder? You know, who am I trying to find here? And that's, everybody says to me, oh, that's a great puck out, Aoife. But it actually isn't me at all. It's the outfield players. It's a combination. Actually making, like, oh, I'm hitting in space, and they're like, that's great space. I'm like, oh, sure, I didn't make it. Yeah, well, I think it's definitely, like... It's a bit of both. Yeah, and it's that relationship that you build up over the hours and hours of practice. So you've obviously decided to come back for a year, and you are captain. And is there any pressure at this point, or like, because everybody goes, oh, you're in bonus territory, you won so much, but actually I think as you get older in your career, it gets more and more pressurised, and you want to do it more and more for the various reasons that you put in the back of your head. Yeah, like, is there pressure? Absolutely. Is there more pressure? Absolutely. But, you know, sometimes people talk about pressure in this real negative way, but like, pressure can bring the best out of you, and actually can be quite a good feeling. Yeah. Because I think if you're not under pressure, then you're obviously not pushing yourself to that stage where you could be. So like, for me to start this year, you know, I'm 34, I'm back for a 17th year. Isn't it wonderful that I'm actually being able to feel this pressure and this new added kind of, I suppose, pressure being captain? And I would find myself very lucky to be in this position and to have that kind of pressure that's inside you. Because I hope to God it'll push me that little bit harder on the training ground, in the gym or whatever it is. And maybe even if it makes me perform better for my teammates, then I think that's a wonderful feeling to have.
Yeah, doesn't sound like you're going to be intimidated by the pressure at all. It sounds like you're going to lap it up.
Well, I would like to think that my teammates, sure, they're all captains in the waiting, in my opinion, and I'm not trying to like just sugarcoat it and say we've a lovely, happy dressing room.
No, you have a team of leaders, and I'm sure there's lots of debate.
Oh, there is, right? And like we're quite an open dressing room. Like if you do have an issue, you say it. You don't go behind somebody's back and have a good old bitch about them. You know, you just say it to your face, and it might be hard or awkward at the time, but you just move on. And I think what we have done is we've acknowledged that we have very independent women that have all their own personality. Some are laid back, you think they're asleep, and others are absolutely bananas. But at least they're all on our team, you know, and we have good old crack, but it can be quite an intimidating and intense dressing room at times. Yeah. But I would hope to think that all those girls, like they're all captains and all leaders in their waiting, if they look to me at any stage during the game as a captain, then we've already lost that game.
The whole captaincy thing, actually, the decision behind it almost seems like evidence of the squad mentality that is in. Yeah. It's almost a bigger move from your own perspective to be able to offload that responsibility and kind of substituting ego for the sake of a better squad, essentially.
Yeah, and look, it was probably a difficult decision for Inniscar to make, but I think it was such a progressive one, and that's not because they picked me, nominated me, but it just goes to show that there's greater things out there than just you, the individual, because I'm sure for Inniscar it would have been a fantastic honour for one of those girls to have been captain, but it was seeing the bigger picture maybe, and actually allowing their own girls to maybe step up as well and just maybe enjoy it as well. Rena was captain last year and did a super job, so I'm under pressure on that anyway to do a near as good job as she did, but I think it's fantastic for Niamh and Rena as well to just maybe throw the shackles off as well for them to go out and actually enjoy the game. But yeah, I think it's a good old sign.
Aoife, great stuff. Best of luck. Thanks very much for joining us.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Yeah. What has stopped you just bouncing up that extra little level? I know it's probably not much of a gap to the likes of Cork and Kilkenny and maybe Galway as well, but there is just that little bit of a gap. What is that gap? How do you close it?
I feel like it's just like when we watch matches, we see that we are as good as the Corks and Kilkennys and Galways, but I think it's just we're just not playing as a team collectively at times, and we get into that comfort zone and we just can't finish the games at times, which is annoying as well. And I think if we just we need to be more of a stronger group, which we're trying to do this year, and I think that's going to really benefit us in the future.
Is that something that you've talked about and addressed? Because those are things, if you let them fester, they cause problems. If you tackle them head on, maybe you have a chance of getting them right.
Yeah, we do know we haven't really got past the stage that we want to get past, and we have addressed it, and we are trying to do things differently this year, not do the same old. So it's good that we change it up a bit, and I think that's what Tipperary really needs for Camogie.
And you're a busy person yourself. You're a dual star and an All-Ireland winner last year in football.
Yeah, it's great after winning the All-Ireland, and it'd be a big step up now up to senior this year and Division 2 in the league, and hopefully we get further this year. I know we're playing the harder teams and we'll be winning all the time, but we'll try our best, and I'll keep two of them going anyway. And yeah, it's great that I had the opportunity to do the two of them with the county, because the management work really well together with it, and it's good to girls, because lots of girls do play both, so it's good to have that.
Tip dual star Orla O'Dwyer in conversation with Oisin Langan at the Littlewoods launch yesterday. The Littlewoods Leagues even get underway this weekend. Now, a massive response obviously to the news that Martin O'Neill has been in talks, apparently according to a bunch of newspaper stories, with Stoke. The talks are so detailed that it's got to the point where he's confirmed that he would like his backroom team to be there. There's speculation that Roy Keane may be part of that backroom team, although colour me sceptical on that one until the deal is absolutely done. But a tweet from Stephen Elliott suggests that this is an inevitability. If Mon and Roy head off to Stoke, then surely this man has got to be called upon. That's the photograph of the GIF. That's the end of the GIF. You've seen the GIF. If you haven't seen the GIF, drop what you're doing, stop this feed right now and go and search for the GIF. Loads of other comments coming in that. Why don't we give the job to Tony O'Donoghue? He seemed to know more about the game than Martin O'Neill pre and post match. I mean, I'm sure Tony O'Donoghue is available for selection. Somebody else says that they won't be disappointed to see Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane go to Stoke if Tony O'Donoghue signs for Sky. Lads, if you were Martin O'Neill after the Denmark match and the reaction to it, would you stay? I think that the reaction to it afterwards is definitely one of the main reasons why this might happen. I think the other thing is that he lost 5-1 in one of the biggest games of his career, a knockout qualifier to go to the World Cup from the fairly ideal scenario of being 1-0 up at home after a 0-0 draw in the away leg. So I suspect that maybe he feels it's run its course at this point. And unless we get Roy Keane, then I'm not really sure that Ireland football fans are going to be all that happy with what comes next, because you would have to make Mick McCarthy the bookies' favourite for the job in the immediate aftermath of both of them going, if they do end up both going. A couple more on this before we wrap up today. Roy Keane shouldn't go to Stoke with Martin O'Neill and should still be an assistant. He should go and look for a managerial role, says Danny Sheehan. I'll drive them there myself, says Justin O'Hanlon. And I do think both will join Stoke, says Damien McAvoy. The Roy Keane press conference in the Premier League every Friday would be box office. That is pretty much all we've got time for today. We've been giving you the chance to win a copy of FIFA 18 for the PS4. We asked you to tag a friend who you always beat in FIFA, and we'll be in contact with the winner of that a little bit later on. But for now, it's been a pretty interesting show. We had Kenny Cunningham on a little bit earlier on about the Roy Keane, Martin O'Neill scenario. He believes that Roy Keane will ultimately end up being offered the opportunity to become the Republic of Ireland manager, and that John Delaney should be doing everything in his power at this moment to offer Keane the job. He did also say, after I'd goaded him into it, that he'd love to be part of any future Republic of Ireland setup as a coach, but that ultimately the plan should be to have somebody involved in the setup being the next manager in waiting, so that this kind of notion of a succession stakes isn't something that is left to chance and whatever, as it has been pretty much since I don't know, since John Giles got the job. Really, have we ever had a succession plan in place going all the way back? We also had Fergus Connolly with us in studio, a wide-ranging feature-length interview with Fergus Connolly that touched on a whole heap of stuff. So if you missed any of that, you'll get it on podcast. Just search for Off the Ball OTB AM, and you should be able to get our podcasts on Stitcher, on iTunes, on TuneIn, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts. You can always get our stuff on offtheball.com. And that's pretty much all we've got time for this Thursday night. Thursday Night Football with John Giles coming up on the radio tonight on News Talk, and Adrian Barry will be back with the baryometer, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, from 7:45 tomorrow. Good luck.